What is up, you plebs? YourTotalWarMaster, and this is the third episode of this faction review and guide for Medieval 2. Today we have the Holy Roman Empire, and we're changing the format a bit. Instead of having the historical background, I think I will be doing now multiplayer review with the help of my friend Dominion R, who was kind enough to help me out because I'm not good at multiplayer. He is pretty much a god at it, and that's why he has done the review for me. I'll read it out, but thank you very much for him. Hopefully you guys enjoyed this video, and let's get in. And thank you again, Dominion, and this is his review of the multiplayer aspect of HRE. So the cavalry, General's Bodyguard, we have late and early. They of course have 2 hit points. They're good in absorbing damage and have a good defense. Their good heavy cavalry units are also Teutonic Knights or Imperial Knights. They're armored piercing because they have maces, they have a powerful charge, and they're like a top cavalry. Their mounted crossbowmen are the recommended missile cavalry. They have armored piercing arrows. For their missile infantry, they have most importantly Pavis crossbowmen alongside crossbow militia and peasant crossbowmen. Pavis crossbowmen have large shields on their backs, which they can turn when they're reloading, and they of course have armor piercing shots. Heavy infantry, they have pikemen and pike militia, and they have dismounted feudal knights and dismounted imperial knights. For their auxiliary units, they have religious fanatics who are good for absorbing damage, and they're actually good versus cavalry. Their problem is low morale, but they're quite cheap. Armored sergeants are of course as other armored sergeants. Skiltrum is good against charges. They're a good unit to support the cavalry, and they have sergeant spearmen as well. To sum it up a bit, they have a lack of unit choices to have more versatile armies. They're missing light cavalry to harass the enemy, and a lack of heavy cavalry because they only have like normally 2 choices. Their two-handed units are much worse than the other two-handed units compared to like Varangian Guard or dismounted Portuguese Knights. They have poor anti-cavalry units, and auxiliary units are not really too good because they're too expensive. If artillery is allowed though, their strength are the Serpentines, who are definitely worth picking up, but of course most of the time they're banned. Okay, so we also have some recommendations for the 15,000 Florence battle. Up in the top left we have a rush army composition. On the top right we have a balanced composition. Bottom left we have defending, and bottom right we have a harassing plus balanced. It's kind of a balanced army with some harassing also, so if anyone wants to learn from the best, you can just copy this army and we have a higher chance of winning. And now over here we have, for the 10,000 battles, we have a rush composition up in the top left, balanced composition in the top right, a composition that is good versus lots of cavalry in the bottom left, and a composition that is quite balanced, but where you still want to kind of take the initiative in the bottom right. Same thing. If you want to win more battles in 10,000 battles, this is the place to go. Now we're gonna look at the roster from a different perspective, from my perspective, who is a single player or hot seat player. They of course have your old typical units: peasants, stem militia, pike militia, spear militia, sergeant spearmen, armored sergeants. Basically all the factions have these units, which are pretty good. Halberd militia is quite interesting. They do have my favorite unit of this game. Not maybe because they're good, but because they look freaking epic. Which are dismounted Gothic Knights. They just look freaking epic. And even better, like the Gothic Knights. They just look so freaking epic, right? Now I think in multiplayer they're actually trash because they don't have shields. I'm not 100% sure, but they just look epic. They're Forlorn Hope and Zweihinda are pretty decent looking, and they look pretty epic, but I don't think they're particularly good. And the rest of their heavy infantry is consisting of feudal knights and imperial knights, all dismounted of course. They do have Pavis crossbowmen, which are really good crossbowmen, and of course your standard peasant archers, peasant crossbowmen, and crossbow militia. Their cavalry, they have mounted sergeants, merchant cavalry militia. You're basically pretty standard. But of course the Gothic Knights are the outlier, and they're really freaking cool. Mounted crossbowmen and reiters are really nice as well, right? I think reiters are actually really underrated because of the morale hit that they can do. And in their cannons, they have some serpentines and basilisks, which are pretty darn good. Let's see what the game says about them. They say they're strong all around, but that they do lack the late period professional armies of England and France. Now, if you look at that, like if you check France, right, I wouldn't really maybe agree with that. They might have a bigger roster of cavalry, and perhaps Scots Guard or Aventuriers are better archers and crossbowmen. But if you compare noble knights, feudal knights, and chivalric knights, you know, the dismounted ones, and compare that to like the dismounted feudal knights and the imperial knights, and you know, basically it's really similar. So I don't really know why the game would say that. Maybe, you know, in cavalry they do have better units elsewhere, but still, I think it's a pretty decent faction with some real cool looking units. Okay, I will comment on the HRE's single-player campaign now, which I think is actually fairly easy. I believe that HRE is one of the factions that you can like really just steamroll, because I mean, you will be probably fighting on more fronts because everyone's gonna, you know, attack you at some point. But I still feel that you're just that strong that just doesn't matter. You can get things like Bern or Metz pretty soon at the campaign. You can get down to Milan really fast and Venice, and then just take over this with Bologna. And Genoa, Milan, Venice are one of the better one of the better settlements in the game because they are like really, they have good trade, they have naval stuff going on, they have a lot of income. What you should probably do as well is get rid of the Danes as soon as possible. You know, you can normally siege Hamburg without any bigger problems. I don't think these guys normally attack you if you do that. But if they do, well, it doesn't really matter that much. Getting Magdeburg, Prague, you know, should be pretty standard. You're actually kind of safe from Hungarians, I believe so, because you can just like make a fort there and fort over here, and then you just see them coming. You can go down there to Zagreb. Now, Venetians normally take it, but that's not really a problem. You can just take it. I would probably attack Venice, Milan, and Denmark first, and get these rebel settlements over here. And basically at that point, you'll be just so strong that I don't think you can even lose. After that, you can of course decide if you want to continue east or west. I would probably consider going west first, getting rid of the French, and then sweeping out and getting all the British Isles. You know, over here you can just stack some forts, and all of these land is also up for the take. And of course Prague, Breslau, Magdeburg, Hamburg, Stettin, even Thorn probably. This is just rebel settlements that will never get taken by anyone. Maybe perhaps Breslau might get taken, maybe Thorn by Poland, but normally if you get rid of the Danish, these settlements are just, you know, free to be taken, and it's like really easy. And after you're done in the west, with France and England and Scotland, you can move down to Iberia while simultaneously also taking over the Italy. And then once you do that, you basically just steamroll to the east, and that's it. I think it's fairly easy, to be honest. Now, while I think that the single-player campaign is quite easy, the hot-seating campaign is actually much more demanding, because if you don't have good diplomacy, you are completely screwed. Why? Well, basically because you're surrounded from everywhere. Budapest and Hungary, there's a big chance they'll go and attack you. With Poland, you probably won't have too much confrontation to start, but if you get to Prague and he gets to Breslau, you know, they're pretty darn close. The Danish will probably want to fight you at some point as well, because there's the only way that they can really realistically expand. France is a coin flip. They can either attack you or they can either attack England. What I would probably try to do with them is get an alliance with them and let them deal with the English. Down in the south, the Milanese and the Venetians are also a bit of a problem, because Bologna is easily to be taken by the enemies. Both Milanese and Venetians could come in and try to swoop it away from you. What to do, as I said, try to get as many reliable alliances as possible. Now, the worst thing that can happen, of course, is that you get an alliance with someone, but then they backstab you, right? This is like really worst case scenario. But it can happen, but try to really get the people you trust. Try to get, with an alliance with them. Most importantly, I think France, because if you neutralize France, then that's one front, a very big front that you don't need to fight. And I feel like if you can get rid of this threat, that'd be really good. You probably do want to get rid of Danish as soon as possible. I would probably take a lot of my resources to do that, because that's, again, another front kind of gone. And then you probably will have to deal with these guys over here in Milan and Venice. Yeah, Milan and Venice. I think over here you do really want to fight and get, the hold of this territory, and then it's really, it's really hard to do. One good thing is that you can get a diplomat down to Rome relatively fast, and yeah, I would probably, in an ideal world, you and France get an alliance forever, and then you just get rid of these guys over here. France gets rid of the western factions, and then comes down there to help you versus Egypt. Although, by the time, if most of Europe is under your control, you're like just too strong together with France. So I think that's like the best way, but it's definitely quite difficult. And here we are at the end of the video, where I also always do some ratings, and I would rate the HRE as A, because I feel like they're a really cool faction. They have I like the colors, I like their units. As I said, they have, according to me at least, the coolest looking unit and units in vanilla Medieval 2, which are the Gothic Knights and the dismounted Gothic Knights. I think they're just freaking cool. Single player difficulty I would put as easy. It's not super easy, but still very manageable, just because you're just start off so strong. Hot seating difficulty is hard though, because you're surrounded, and AI is not human. Humans can actually play, really better in Medieval 2, because the AI is kind of crap. So yeah, I would give it hard difficulty for hot seating. And for the PvP rating, according to Dominion R, it is rated as B, which means they're pretty good, but not at the best. And I think I am inclined to agree with him. And yeah, that is it for the video. Again, thank you to Dominion for helping me out. Hope you guys have enjoyed. If you have, make sure to enjoy the Bleb Army with liking, subscribing, and commenting down below. And until next time, back off.